Hi everyone, welcome to Subtle Asian Book Club. Today we are so excited to bring you an interview with the one and only Sarah Suk, author of Made in Korea. Woo! I'm Tiffany.
I'm Alexandra.
Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
So hi, I'm Sarah Suk, the author of Made in Korea, which is a young adult rom-com about two teens selling Korean beauty products at school and going head to head to outsell each other and maybe falling in love along the way. We'll see. I don't know. No spoilers. But yeah, I live in Vancouver, Canada, where I write for kids and teens, and I'm really happy to be here.
So jumping right into the first question, would you like to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write Made in Korea and how has it evolved since the initial idea?
Yeah, so Made in Korea began just with the thought, I want to write a story about teens that sell Korean beauty products at school, but I don't really know what else they do yet. So it kind of evolved from there. I think when I first initially thought of the idea, I even imagined like a whole secret underground market at school where all these teens were selling things. Like I envisioned like in band class, a kid would have like secret products in his tuba and just like pull them out secretly during class. But I couldn't quite work out the details of that. So it turned into more of like a school sanctioned selling business thing. But that was one thing that I started with. And another thing that I knew I wanted to write about was like a group of Korean teenagers. So I had always envisioned this full cast of Korean teens. I actually, when I first was dreaming up the project, I envisioned like multiple POVs. So the story is told from the perspective of Valerie and Wes, who are the main characters. But in the origin days, I was like, Charlie will have a POV, Pauline will have a POV, Taemin will have a POV, all these side characters in the book, which I was maybe a little too generous with that. It didn't quite work out because it was a little chaotic to have too many of them. So that was one thing that changed as I was writing it. But yeah, the story about the full cast of Korean teens selling Korean beauty products at school, though, it did kind of stay the same throughout. It just evolved in how I told it.
That's awesome. Actually, one of my favorite parts of the book is that there are so many characters and so many relatable, lovable characters. And I especially love our two main leads because it's like Valerie is clearly very headstrong, and then Wes is like such a soft boy.
Cinnamon roll!
I know, he's such a cinnamon roll. We love him so much. But would you like to introduce them using only 3 words, each of the characters?
Yes. So Valerie Kwan, I would say she is ambitious, passionate, and prickly. And Wes Jung, I would say he is musical, sensitive, and stressed. He's very stressed for most of the book. Yeah, so those are my 2 main leads, and that's their introductions.
Would you like to introduce the side characters or do you want to hold off on that?
Side characters, sure. I mean, they're very important to the story. Obviously, they almost had a POV, but not quite. So Charlie Song is Valerie's cousin and helps her run the business. He is loyal and a hopeless romantic. So that's Charlie. And then there's Pauline, who helps Wes with his business. She is thoughtful, curious, and intelligent. And I'll do one for Taemin too. He's a side character that doesn't appear until a little later, but in my mind, he's part of the main cast. So he's he's a jokester. He's affable, and he is conflicted.
Amazing words. They all fit the characters so well. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what has been your favorite part about writing Made in Korea? And if you have any favorite scenes, quotes, characters, obviously.
I think my favorite part of writing Made in Korea was really just getting to know the characters as I was writing it. I kind of had like the outline of them before I started writing, but it was really in the process that I felt like they revealed themselves to me and that I really got to know them. So it was just such a joy to get to know all of the characters like Valerie and Wes and all the sides. They were just all so vibrant and different from each other. So it was really fun for me to get to know them. As far as favorite moments or scenes, without giving too much away, I think one of my favorite scenes to write was the entirety of the Halloween scene. Like anything that took place on Halloween, I just really enjoyed writing it. Just something about having people in costume, it just makes it so much more fun, I guess, to envision them getting up to all these things that, not in costume would have been fun, but in costume, it's like extra fun. So that was really enjoyable. And then I also really loved writing every single scene with Valerie and her grandma. I just love their dynamic and I love their relationship. So writing them, particularly, I think there's just one really, really short scene where they're eating koguma together, which is Korean sweet potato, and just like chatting over the kitchen table. And yeah, I really enjoyed writing that. It was very short and simple, but all the moments between them were really special for me to write.
Yeah, I love them. That was like another one of my many favorite things about the book as the family dynamic. But do you want to talk about the romance between Valerie and Wes? I know the Halloween scene is one of the earlier stages of when the relationship starts developing. So how did you go about forming their romance?
Yeah, so I had already shared a little bit about like the origins of Made in Korea and how it's evolved. But one of the other things about the very, very early stages of Made in Korea was that Valerie and Wes were not actually a romance. They did not have a romantic connection in my original envisioning of the story. I kind of saw them as being like business rivals to kind of like a mutual begrudging respect at the end, I think it was my initial thought. But I had mentioned how I felt like the characters kind of revealed themselves to me as I was writing. So after I wrote a few chapters, I like shared it with my critique partners, and they're like, "So you're telling me these two don't end up together? Like that's what you're saying? These two like don't end up together?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're just gonna be friends." And they're like, "They're just gonna be friends." That's fine. I mean, friendship is great, and there were a lot of great friendships in the book. But it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, maybe the characters are trying to tell me something that's very clear on the page, but in my head, I'm like, yeah, it's just fine. This was fine the way that I thought of it. But yeah, I felt like they kind of revealed to me that they had feelings for each other and that they would like to pursue those feelings. And, as an author, I felt like, who am I to stand in the way of young love? So it was written in. And it was really fun. It was still important for me to have that mutual respect aspect be kind of like the core of the relationship in a way, or a very important factor of the relationship anyway. I really wanted it to end on a note or I wanted their evolution to be one of kind of battling each other to respecting each other. So that is still the same. But I also really enjoyed writing kind of like the awkward first love dynamic that they have. It was so much fun for me to write. So, you know what? If they want to be together, they're going to be together. That's what I think about that.
I think their romance came together very naturally, and it was just so much fun to read about. You also talked about this a little bit before, but the book largely focuses on different family dynamics and parental expectations. So why was it important for you to include these different relationships, from Valerie and her grandmother to Wes and his father, just the whole thing?
Mm-hmm. I think with family dynamics, so I had originally mentioned that I at first didn't really think of Valerie and Wes's romance at the very beginning. I think because from the beginning, I wanted a lot of that family dynamic aspect to shine through, and I wanted to focus a lot on their families. I'm really grateful that in the end I was able to do both, like focus on their romance as well as their families. But I think that with their families, and it's just, families are so complicated, aren't they? Like you can find your greatest champions in your family, but also your greatest hurdles in a sense. Not to say that these, that specific family members are hurdles themselves, but like their expectations or the things that they want for you that might be different than what you want for yourself. So I wanted to show kind of the broadness of what we can find in families. Like Valerie has her grandma, who is like her rock and her number one, 100% always there for her support. And then she has her parents, who she kind of grapples with, like the feeling of needing to prove herself to them and prove herself worthy. And Wes too, like he feels like he has such different wants than his parents, and he fears disappointing them so much. And it's interesting because a lot of these things, whether someone is your champion or someone, you know, gives you a lot of obstacles to overcome. Like both of those things come from a place of love at the end of the day, which is so challenging. You know, it almost makes it so much more complicated. I think with Wes particularly, that feeling of disappointment is because, you know, he loves his parents, he doesn't want to let them down, and he has a sense that they want something different for him because it's coming from a place of love and wanting him to be stable and not wanting him to have to worry about his future. So I think that can be really challenging, how love shows itself in different ways. And sometimes it's in ways that really frees you, and other times it's ways that you have to learn to speak up for yourself, even if you know it's coming from a good place. So I wanted to show a lot of those different dynamics. And, you know, it took, to be honest, it took me a really long time to kind of get those family dynamics on the page the way that I had envisioned in my head, or it just took me a long time to kind of journey through that as well, because it's so complicated in a way, and because it's difficult to show it in a way that's not so one note. And I feel like Valerie and her sister's relationship was one way that I wanted to show the complexities too of how siblings can see each other. So in Valerie's eyes, like her older sister, Samantha, is the golden child. You know, everything is going right for her, but Samantha has other feelings too. You know, she has her own life and her own struggles. So families are complicated, and I just wanted to show even like a small glimpse into that through Valerie and Wes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all the family aspects because, like you said, you showed Valerie and her sister, as well as her relationship with her grandma, and all like these different dynamics and how it can add complexities to the characters. Mm-hmm. And then another thing about the book that we really liked is that like you also tied in Korean culture and like Asian American identity. And so another main reason why we really like this book is because it made us like proud to be Asian, especially with the full cast of Asian characters, especially as children of diaspora. How do you go about writing your own experiences into the book?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because this book is so much of me. And yet at the same time, I would say none of the characters or the relationships that the characters have are meant to be direct parallels of myself or any of the relationships I have. So Wes and his parents aren't necessarily me and my parents. Valerie and her sister is very different than me and my sister, and so on. But so much of my feelings and like themes from my own life made its way into the book. So on a character level, like Wes is kind of people-pleasing nature and not wanting to disappoint his parents. That's definitely something that I resonate with. Valerie's goal-oriented mindset and the way that she's almost has a hard time defining herself outside of the things that she does, I think is a pretty strong theme for me as well. So in that sense, I feel like my experiences contributed to the creation of these characters. In terms of like the Korean cultural things, that was 100%, you know, my experience in my life, especially the food. You know, writing a book is just your excuse to put in as much of your favorite food in something as possible. So all of that was totally inspired from my own life or food that I love. There's a lot of bingsu in the book, which is Korean shaved ice, which is my favorite dessert of all time. I actually considered being like a professional bingsu blogger at one point. I was like, I'm gonna open a blog and I'm just gonna go to different bingsu cafes and just review them. It's gonna be great. And like I had envisioned this whole future for myself, but it's tricky when there's only like 3 bingsu cafes where you live and you're like, well, it kind of limits your opportunities. But I'm still holding on to that dream for the future. So if ever one day I launch it, you know, I'll let you know. But yeah, the food was definitely part of it. The love of K-pop is definitely inspired from my own life. The Korean family dynamics for sure, I think, were, again, not direct parallels from my own life, but inspired by, particularly Valerie and her grandma. That for me was not my personal experience. I didn't grow up with my grandparents. So my dad's dad, so my grandpa on his side, he passed away before I was born. And then my grandma on his side passed away when I was quite young. And then on my mom's side, my grandparents, they lived in Korea and I live in Canada. So I never really grew up with them. But I did get to spend a little bit of time with them when I was in university. I went on exchange to Seoul. So I went to go visit them every weekend because I was just so fascinated by that grandparent-child relationship, grandparent-grandkid relationship. And growing up, like all my friends were really close with their grandparents. They like went to go visit them all the time. And I was always like, oh, like what's that like? I don't know what that's like. So I went to go see them every weekend when I lived in Korea. And it was just such a special experience. And I'm so grateful I got to do that. Both of them have now since passed away. So it really felt like such a short window of time that I was able to have that relationship. So Valerie and her grandma largely came out of like my longing to have had that for myself almost. And I know that a lot of younger teens do have that kind of special relationship with their grandparent. And I think that's so valuable and such a great thing to see. So that also kind of came from in a sense, my experience / non-experience. But yeah, I was really happy to include a lot of my love of Korean culture and experience of Korean culture into the book, both in like food and, dynamics and relationships and characters. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
For sure. It was just so much fun for us to read. I know both of us felt so represented. But we're not Korean, but like the Asian culture and just like so much of it ties into family that it touched our hearts. Xander, do you have something you want to say?
Oh yeah. I also forgot to mention it. I noticed how you deliberately chose to write her grandma's name as Harmony and then the mom as like Oma. And I thought that was like really interesting and really reflective of like Korean culture of like using that instead of saying like, oh, her grandma, but like what the meaning is behind that like language change.
Yeah, so that was interesting too. I wanted to include as much of that Korean language as possible as well, because I called my grandma Harmony. I call my parents Oma and Appa. Valerie was a little different in that she called her older sister Samantha, but for me, like I never call my older siblings by their name. They're just Onni and Oppa, which is Korean for older sister, older brother. So a lot of my friends growing up, they're like, so like, what are your siblings' names? You never say their names. And it was like, yeah, like why would I would never. It was just like I would just never do that. So it was I know some people do. So like Valerie and Samantha, they call each other by their names and whatnot. But growing up, I never did. So it was fun to include pieces of Korean language and still figuring out a more like seamless way to do it for future books. But I hope that's something I can continue to seed into my projects.
The next question that we have for you is, do you have like a dream fan cast or who you imagine, like celebrities, anyone, like who the characters as?
Yeah, I would love to see it be adapted for anything, obviously. But I think, to be honest, I would love it if like newcomer teen actors like took up the role of Valerie and Wes. Like I would just really love that for it to be like their first role. And obviously I would love it if they were teenagers because Valerie and Wes are teenagers. So that would be really fun to see. And then I think it would be really fun. Like I don't know if this is at all possible for there to be some kind of crossover from like Korean entertainment into this adaptation. So I would love it if like Valerie's grandma was like an actress from Korea. Like there are so many actresses that I'm totally blanking on their names right now, but there's so many actresses in Korean dramas where it's like the grandma is always played by the same person. And it's like, oh my God, I just saw her in like another drama. So it would be hilarious if she was like in Made in Korea, something like that. I think would just be so fun.
I'm thinking of the grandma in Startup.
Yes.
She's like grandma in every single K-drama I watch.
It's like, wait, weren't you the grandma in the other one? She's like, you're just like how many grandchildren do you have? So she's just like everywhere. So I think that would be hilarious if we got some kind of crossover like that.
Moving on to writing / publishing and industry questions. Made in Korea is your debut book. And so do you want to talk about your experiences in publishing and how it's been like as a woman of color?
Yeah, I think with this one, I'll start with some of the more challenging aspects of it. I think that a lot of a lot of us, a lot of women of color, people of color, I think we struggle with the there can only be one myth, or that kind of scarcity mentality. So if there's already a Korean story out there, it's kind of like, oh, like, is there room for my Korean story? Or like, by the time I'm ready to get my book out there, like, is there going to be space for me? Or are people going to be like, oh, we already have one of those, like, we don't need another one? Kind of like the token Asian kind of feeling, like, oh, is there room for more than one? And I think that is it's such a wild thing to me that we even struggle with that, or we even, not that we struggle with it, but that we even have to struggle with it, I guess I should say, because no one story can possibly represent everybody. Like, it's just impossible. So, even Made in Korea, I included a lot of different Korean characters, but I don't at all expect it to represent all Korean people at all. Like, how is that even possible? It's really not. So it's wild to think that that's this message that we're sent, almost, that there can only be one, or there's only room for one, or, oh, like, we don't have room for your book because we already have one. And it's like, we don't just need one, we need more, we need many, and we need many different stories to represent many different people and many different experiences. So I think that it's unfortunate that the industry makes us feel that there are limited seats at the table. But on the flip side, I have just been so fortunate to have other authors that are women of color really support me and come behind me to say, like, there is room for your story, and there's room for you at this table too, and you're welcome here, and we're so excited for your book. And I remember, like, I was confiding in this friend that I have, she's also kind of a mentor figure to me. I was confiding in her once, just around, like, I'm worried that there won't be room for my book, or like that I just feel like all my peers are like selling these like great stories, but it's like awesome to see all these Asian stories get out there, but there's like a small part of me that I hate that this part exists. That's kind of like, oh, but like, what about me? Like, is there going to be room for me when I'm ready? And she just said, and I like hold on to this so much. She said, one day you're going to be published too. And it's totally valid to feel that way. It's completely normal. Like, you're not alone in that. But one day you'll be published too. And just don't let those feelings take over and turn you bitter and destroy any of your relationships. Like, don't let the bitterness kind of seep into any of your important friendships, because these friendships are going to be the ones that kind of carry you through. Like, those peers, those other writers are going to be the ones who stick by your side as you go through this whole thing. So feel what you need to feel and take care of yourself. But like, one day it will be you, and you don't want to lose anyone important to you on the way. And that was just so, it was almost so simple in a way, but also just like very profound at the same time, that we're in this together. And I think sometimes the world and the industry makes us feel like we need to be pit against each other in a way, but no, like, we're stronger together, and we are the ones who are going to make space for each other. And I've experienced that myself, and I hope that I can also offer that to other people as well. So yeah, that has largely been my experience, and I hope that together we can kind of dismantle that scarcity myth and say that there's room for all of us, because we need those stories, and we need more stories.
Oh, words of wisdom. Are you working on anything new right now? Like, Xandra and I both finished the book, so we're like, what's up next? Can we anticipate anything from you in the near future?
Yeah, I am working on something new at the moment. I can't say too much about it yet, but I will say that it is a little different in tone than Made in Korea, in the sense that it's not a rom-com, but it is still very influenced by Korean culture, and a lot of family dynamics are shaped in the story. So I hope that I can share more about it soon.
We're so excited for it. Do you have any hope, or like, what do you hope that your readers take away from your stories?
I just hope, honestly, that it gives readers as much joy to read it as I felt when I was writing it. Yeah, so whatever people take away from it, I hope that there is at least one moment where it kind of brings a spark of joy in their life.
It definitely did for us. I think some of my favorite scenes were with Charlie, and I don't know if it's a spoiler. I'll cut this one part out of the video, but like, when Charlie was like quizzing Wes and it was like so what's this math question? He's like, we'll do it. I was like, oh my god, I
spoiler at all. No.
Yeah. There are so many parts where I like laughed out loud, and actually I've been in the longest reading slump, but this was the first book where I like binged it at night. Like I started at midnight being like, oh, I'll just read the first chapter, and then I finished it at like 5 a.m. and I was like, what? I remember what it's like to like enjoy reading again. So,
my gosh, that makes me so happy to hear. Thank you for doing that.
She texted me the day after and I was like, are you good? Because I think she woke up at like 2 p.m. or something. And then she was like, you're going to be so proud of me. And I was like, well, actually, I finished the book because we were like planning for this interview.
That is so hilarious. It's like reading Hangover.
So let's jump into like a fun speed round, just like fun-filled questions. Do you want to start off with telling us what your most anticipated 2021 release is?
Yes, my most anticipated 2021 release is The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim, which is a middle grade fantasy about Korean witches living in LA.
Ooh, I didn't know it was set in LA. We're both based in LA.
Oh, yeah, you'll love it. It's really great.
Okay, I'm excited for it. What is a book that you'd recommend to everyone?
I would recommend I'll Give You the Sun by Jan D. Nelson, which is one of my all-time favorite books. I would try to give like a quick little pitch, but I feel like I'll ruin it. It's just really good. Go check it out. I'll Give You the Sun.
What is your favorite Asian food or favorite Korean food or just favorite food in general?
My favorite food is kimchi sujebi, which is like a hand-torn noodle soup, specifically made by my mom. So it's very, very niche.
What is your go-to quarantine hobby?
These days, making Japanese souffle pancakes. I've been really obsessed with it.
Ooh, yeah, that's a fun like party trick.
Yes.
Like it's like
just at parties, like whip out the frying pan, start like flipping pancakes. I'm very popular at parties if I learn how to do that on the spot.
Would you like to tell us your favorite and least favorite trope in books?
My favorite trope, I mean, I have so many. It's impossible to choose one, but in the moment, I will say enemies to lovers is my favorite trope. Yes. But my least favorite trope is when, like in those makeover scenes where like a character takes off their glasses and they're suddenly like super hot. I don't know. I feel like glasses can also look good. So, I mean, in some moments it's funny, like Princess Diaries. I like, that whole movie montage was funny, but overall, I can't say I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah.
I love that Wes just like proudly wears glasses in this.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I was like, Wes is described as hot with glasses. So,
by the way.
So
possible.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have a favorite haichu flavor?
Probably strawberry, I think is my go-to. Although there's all these new flavors that I've never tried. Like they're just launching all these great flavors. I've heard of a cherry flavor that's out there somewhere in the world that I need to try. But until then, strawberry is probably my go-to.
That's a good one. And then finally, what is your must-have K-beauty product?
Probably like sunscreen, some kind of sunscreen. Stay safe, wear sun protection, especially as the summer is coming. Don't forget your sunscreen. That's what I would say.
Those are all the questions that we had. Thank you so much again, Sarah, for being here with us. This was so much fun. I think it was just like getting to relive the book all over again. We really had a great time. Do you have any lasting messages or words you want to give to your audience, fans, readers?
Just thank you for reading. Thank you so much for reading. And thank you so much to you two for having me. It was so much fun just to talk about the book and to share about how it started and how far it's come. I didn't actually realize how much had changed since my initial imagining of the book to now. So it was fun to walk through that journey with you. And yeah, I'm just really excited for more people to read it. So thank you so much.
Yay! Also, as a quick plug, like, are you doing signed copies? Like, if anyone wants to like buy a copy of your book, are you doing like tour? Probably not 'cause it's COVID, but where can people find you?
I'm just in my apartment. So if you live in Vancouver, Canada, I will probably try to go around to bookstores and sign them. But if you live anywhere else in the world, it might be tricky right now. I am offering pre-orders at the moment from kids' books in Vancouver, signed pre-orders, that is. But I don't know when this is coming out. So by that point, those might not be available anymore. But if this comes out before May 18th, you can get one from kids' books. But if not, I'll let you know. But online, you can find me at sarahsuk.com. And then on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at sarahheadysuk, which is spelled SARHAELISUK. So you can find me on either of those platforms.
Woo! Thank you so much for watching our interview, and we hope to see you next time. Bye!